Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 865, plenty to talk about. We'll be talking about the missing startup sounds in Windows 8 and the special sound that was going to be for Surface devices. I've got a couple of reviews for you. We've got new builds of Windows 11, 22H2, EV news, and how I've been inspired by real-world sounds on my phone into making some music. So let's get straight to Gary. Gary, good evening.
Good evening.
Managed to get through the battle with Teams and get to join the call.
I did in the end, yeah. It's been a bit of a challenge tonight, but I got there in the end, which is always the key thing. Once you get there, you're fine.
Yeah. Now, Richard is not here tonight because he's going to the States to the a rocket launch, which is, there's no way that's going to happen while he's actually there. But he's hoping, so hopefully he'll get to see that, because that's very exciting to see that. I forget which one he was. He did tell us last week.
Is that the moon launch, I think? Was it?
Yeah. So I think he's going to enjoy that if that works out, and he can get to that. We've got some new builds of Windows 11, 22H2, and release preview and dev and so on. We've got a couple of review things. We've got missing startup sounds in Windows, and I believe you've got a new laptop as well.
I have got a new laptop, yeah. So.
Well, that's something you've not had for a while then. So what was that?
Well, basically my last laptop. Do you remember last time I said my laptop was getting rather warm?
Yes, I think you do. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the next day smoke started coming out of it, which was probably the best thing you want to see. And I think one of the fans had seized up and it got plugged up. But unfortunately, because I didn't catch it, and normally I'd take it apart and clean the fans and everything, but I think I didn't catch it in time, and it kind of overheated. Yeah. And wasn't functioning particularly well after that, so I've had to replace it. So I've gone a very similar thing again. I've got HPX Spectre X360 with 32 gigs of RAM, which is the key thing for me. The more RAM you have, the better. Always the way. And it's got a slightly bigger screen now. It's one of these ones which has got the slightly higher aspect ratio. It's a 10 rather than a 9 the height, which does actually make a big difference in terms of how far you scroll down screens for things. I guess it's the old conventional size of a laptop screen that was when we used to have the old ones, but still a bit wider than the old. So you still get a nice wide screen on it, but yeah, it's not 16:9, it's 16:10. So it works well. It's got a few nice features. Fingerprint reader and a fairly decent camera. I think this camera's better than the last one. And I think the microphone at one is pretty good as well, from what I'm told. And I'm actually normally I have my mic plugged in. I haven't got that plugged in tonight, so I don't know what it's sounding like, but it looks like it's doing a good job from what I can see.
Yeah, it's pretty good actually. Yeah, it sounded quite clear.
Yeah, so yeah, I think it's good, and you sound very clear as well, so that's all good. So so far so good. I've copied everything across using Laplink PC Mover from my last laptop, which when you've got almost a terabyte of data takes a long while.
Laplink, that brings back memories. That's been around for years, hasn't it? In fact, I remember you used to have a serial cable, didn't it?
Yeah, and now the easy transfer stuff has gone out of Windows. It's actually one of the only ways of getting some of the stuff across. Although I have to say the Windows 11 onboarding did work to bring the stuff across from my old PC. I've got a Windows 11 PC now.
Oh, well, that's big news. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. But yeah, it was interesting setting it all up. It's worked well, and it does seem to be working reasonably well. A few things I need to set up on it. Screen sharing isn't working the way I wanted it to do, and some of the display lineouts and stuff, the multiple displays, are not quite working how I wanted it to work. But
I think what you'll like, which I found the main when you're using multi-monitors on Windows 11 is it remembers things. So I'm using the multi-monitor now, and I've got an Edge window on the screen up there, and then I'll go and work downstairs, and I'll come back in, plug it in, and it moves the Edge window back up into the multi-monitor. Whereas in Windows 10, once you've gone back to a single monitor, it won't put it back, and you have to manually move it back up. So it remembers that multi-monitor configuration, which is really nice. So that is a nice little touch that makes quite a bit of difference on your workflow if you're switching around. Yeah.
This is quite interesting actually, because I've just literally just switched on Extend Desktop, and it's actually moved the screen which was last showing on my Windows 10 on the other screen onto the other screen.
Yeah. Yeah,
Really
and
interesting.
it's good. Yeah, so if you take your laptop and you go and work in the living room, and then it moves it back onto the single screen, you plug back in on your dock or whatever, and it moves it back to the dual screen mode, which I found really handy. So because I switch between modes, so if I'm if in the office, it's in the dock. If I'm in my home office, it's in the dock. But if I'm downstairs, it's not in the dock, but it does remember these things. And I do like to split the windows up. So I think it's quite a nice feature that. Of course, with it being the original version of Windows 11, you will hit some issues on customizing your taskbar and your start menu, but you'll have to wait for 22H2 for them.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So, do you? Your main thing is dev stuff, but do you use Hyper-V and that kind of thing, or is it just Visual Studio?
Yeah. So Hyper-V is really critical for actually the way I work, because as you know, I've got many clients, so having different Hyper-V set up for each of those clients is really key to me.
Yeah, that's a good way of working. I remember our friend Jason, when he was on the show and he did all the SQL stuff, he had customers, and then he was doing the same thing, and he had multiple instances. And yeah, I find it very handy for testing Windows 11 and having all the different configurations as well. So Hyper-V is sort of the first thing I install now when I get a new laptop. In fact, in some respects, I think you're probably better to install the minimum on the host OS and get everything in the guest OS. But the things like USB and sound and graphics aren't quite good enough, so I couldn't install, say, video editing software within a VM, because that would be really portable. Then, wouldn't it? You could just shut down if you get a new laptop, you shut down your host. They copy the VHDX file over, starts it up on the next one, but it's not. Windows isn't quite there yet for that.
Yeah, this is definitely a lot better, I have to say. I'm impressed so far.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a nice, cleaner interface as well. So I think you'll enjoy that. And the rumor being that September 20th, you should be getting 22H2 on it.
Yeah.
So Microsoft haven't officially announced this date yet, but there's a few sites reporting the date of 20th of September for 22H2. And that brings some nice upgrades. So that includes folders in the start menu, drag and drop on the taskbar, accessibility stuff, which we saw when we were down at Microsoft. They've got some good features on that as well. So there's quite a lot of interesting changes around on that 22H2. Which
I'm really excited about accessibility stuff. I think that's a significant improvement.
So I've got an article on 22H2 as well. So I'm just going to update it, because we still don't know exactly which features are in 22H2, because tabbed browsing is in beta, but it's not in release preview. So we don't know how long that's going to go. But I've heard that it won't be in the ship version, but it will be coming out soon. So it could be that we get 22H2, and then a little bit later we get the tab file explorer. But there are lots of updates in 22H2 that make it well worth looking into or applying, especially around the task manager and the start menus and taskbar, and so the accessibility as well. So current date for that is probably September 20th. So we'll interested to see if that is the case. And it would be great if there was some kind of Surface event where they could announce some new Surface. I think the Surface Go is due a refresh at some point. So I'd like to see that as well. So yeah, so hopefully we'll get an event, announce an event and Windows, and we'll get some details about the 22H2 launch. In fact, just today, Microsoft announced or released an update for 22H2 if you're in release preview. So I think it's 22 build 22621.457, and that's got a lot of fixes in it basically, and I just applied that to my virtual machine. No issues with that so far, so I think we're pretty close to that being, that getting done. When it'll actually, 20th September is when the rumored date is, so we'll see on that. Also on Windows 11 for the dev channel, there was 25128, which I installed. I think I was telling Richard last week. I'll share this screen out. I'm back on the VMs for dev channel because my Surface Go is not a happy device anymore. The bits of the screen don't work with the finger. The keyboard's now no longer working. So, and it doesn't seem to be a driver issue. It's doing it in the BIOS. So. So I think that's not so good. So anyway, so I've been running on these virtual machine, but yeah, there's some nice improvements in the build last week. 25182 support for the camera app with shutter support. So if you've got one of the hardware shutters, it'll actually say your camera's not working because you've got your shutter closed, rather than just sort of staring at your thing. Where's my camera not working? And there's a few other fixes as well, and the usual set of known issues, but I quite, the way that they're working with they're throwing these features into dev and then they're picking and choosing them and going through to into beta, like the taskbar overflow, that kind of thing. So, because the rumors are that they're going to move away from even the yearly update and just go to releasing the features when they're ready. So, I'm not sure that's the best way of doing it, because I think certainly from an IT admin point of view, it's nice to have a version that you can make as a supported version that you can deploy and know is supported. Whereas if it was just patches and features rolled out through Windows Update, it's hard to understand which machine is on which version. So I think it's still better. So if they go for next year, they'll be off for 23H2 or whatever. So they still do the yearly updates, but have them all rolled together. So, I mean, who knows? Because if they said that they got, what is it, 3 years and then on to the next version. So we could be looking at Windows 12 then, yeah.
Yeah, it could be.
Or do you think we'll go back to a name this time?
Oh, you never know.
Microsoft seems a bit obvious. But then 11 seemed obvious, didn't we, when we were discussing that? So,
wonderful Windows after that.
Oh yeah, that's the old. We've had that discussion before as well, haven't we? Yeah. So, anyway, so these builds, 25182, not particularly tied to any particular build or release. It's just these are the features that they're testing at the moment. So I keep testing those, and I'll do videos of those as they come out. Now, talking of Windows releases, you may remember, or I think this was something we talked about maybe over a year ago. Windows 8 didn't have a startup sound. And there was a video, just make sure I get the right video by Jens Harris, who was one of the development team on Windows 8. I think quite senior, wasn't he, in the team? And he talked about why they killed the startup sound in Windows 8. Performance reasons and other reasons. But I just find it quite bit of a shame. I quite like the old startup sounds, but they got rid of them and consigned to history. So there's a great video explaining all about that. But just over the weekend, Jens has posted a new video, and Jensen Harrison, isn't it? That's it. Yeah, and he's posted a new video. With the actual including the sound that would have been in Windows 8, the actual startup sound, and they've even got a bit an interview with the sound designer that worked on that at all, Matthew Bennett. So you're talking about sort of how the philosophy behind the Windows 8 sound and the startup sound. So I don't think I can play this on my video now. I'll hear it, but I don't think you can hear it. So I'll include links to the show notes, and I'll try and extract that audio and drag that into this point here. So this is effectively the Windows 8 sound that you would have heard had it been including the startup. And then, like I said, check out the video because it has got the sort of history. But then Jensen also goes on to talk about the Microsoft Surface. And this, of course, was the launch of Surface with Windows 8, and how first of all how top secret it was, because he was working with the sound designers and couldn't tell the sound designers what this sound was going to be used for, because it was so secretive, the Surface launch. In fact, I don't think there was any leaks about Surface or anything like that at the time. But anyway, that's because they were so secretive. But then it goes on in the video, and if you go right through to the end, you get to hear the startup sound for the Surface devices, which was different to what would have been the startup sound in Windows 8. So effectively, it was a premium startup sound that Windows 8 on Windows 8 on Surface devices had. And Jensen goes on to explain how those came to be, and then demonstrates those sounds well. So I'll drop that in now as well. So I'll try and play that now. So that would be the sound that you would have heard on your Surface, Surface RT, one of them, a few of them over there, and the other, the Surface. It was called the Surface Pro, wasn't it, the original one? Yeah. So it was quite chunky, thick device actually. Now when you look back at it, but lovely devices for the time. And a premium sound. I like the idea of that. The Surface. So there was a really nice Windows startup sound, but if you had a Surface, you had this extra sound, a premium sound that Microsoft created. So it's an interesting story, interesting video as well. So well worth watching that video. And it takes it back to the Windows 8 launch. But Microsoft were super secretive around that time, weren't they, when they came to Windows 8? So
certainly were. Yeah.
So that's the sound of Windows 8, and the sound of Windows 8 on a Surface. So I think you can put the sound to start. The sound of startup sound is included in Windows 11, isn't it? There is one. I think you can enable it, but I think they should be. I'd like to see some more startup sounds, more different sounds, depending on which device you've got. That would be quite interesting. But of course, I suppose startup sounds is. Well, you can have it. It is kind of a thing of the past. When you open your laptop, you definitely don't want it blaring out with a really loud sound on it. I mean, in fact, one of the funny things is quite often listen to music and I use the Surface earbuds, and what it sometimes can happen is you put the earbuds away, so it says, "Oh, you're not listening to music." I'll switch to using the speaker, and if you've left the speaker on, it just starts blaring the music out through the PC speaker. So if I have to remember to, you have to remember to pause it or turn it down or whatever, because the speaker on this Surface Laptop Studio is really loud. So it's a very good speaker, so it can really blast out. But anyway, so good. But check out that video. Interesting. I love the behind the scenes stuff. And this is a definitely interesting one, especially on the sound creation. It's such an interesting subject, and companies like Intel and Microsoft and others, they spend millions, don't they, on research for these trademark sounds and these audio identities, as they call it. In fact, every advert's got some on, especially anything car companies. They all have got their audio. I think there's a term. Is it Sting or audio identity? Yeah,
Sting,
anyway.
Yeah, Sting. Yeah. Ident or Sting. Yeah. Going back to my radio days at Vienna. Yeah. If it's got words, it's an ident. If it's just audio, it's a Sting.
Yeah. I think it's amazing science behind these things, like the Dolby sound, and I suppose the famous one is the Intel Inside one. And the amount of money that must go into developing these kind of sounds, and something like operating system sounds. They get heard so often, don't they? That that's a whole science in itself, isn't it? And there's some great videos actually on YouTube of the various Windows ones and Mac OS, and I think Windows XP, was that the Brian Eno one?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. So there's some great videos on there anyway. So that's about sound design, and well worth checking out. Oh, and speaking of sound, I did get a video review up this week. I did mention, I think last week, I've got a MIDI cable that I reviewed this week. So I'm still using a really clunky old Roland UM1 MIDI controller, which is USB from my laptop through to a couple of devices that don't have USB MIDI, and I still use the Windows Vista drivers on it. I have to manually install the drivers and everything, so I thought it is time to get rid of these. So I have got one of these MIDI cables now, which there's quite a few around them. These are so cheap now, 15 quid. So it's got USB type A on one side and a MIDI in out on the other side. So you plug that in your PC, plug that into your synth, drum machine, sampler, or whatever needs MIDI, and it just shows up in the music software. There's no drivers needed. It's class compliant drivers, so it just works straight out of the box. It works on Mac as well, and so I've tried this out, the video of that, and I thought what would be interesting, because I thought MIDI would work anyway. MIDI note on, note off work fine. Probably what is notoriously more fickle is SysX and that kind of thing. But I tried that with my TX7, 1986 TX7, which and SysX worked perfectly fine on there. So it's a nice long cable as well. So you can laptop down here, synthesizers over there, and it works really, really well. So the only disadvantage, I guess, is the UM1 interface that I've got has two sets of MIDI ports on it, so I'd have to have two of these to replicate that. But I've got a little USB, a 10-port USB hub, so I'm not short of USB ports. So, and they show up independently on the door as well. So nice little thing, but a really easy way to get MIDI on. So that's quite a good one. I've also got another one that I reviewed last year that's got behind here, it's got some LEDs on. There's no LEDs on this one, so if you want one that's just clean, simple cable, that's okay. If you want one that gives you some visual indication what's going on, then I did review one with some LEDs that show in and out and the clock as well. So that's quite helpful if you're trying to diagnose problems with MIDI. But yeah, not bad. I mean, last time I looked, I'm sure they were much more expensive than that, but yeah, nice and cheap now. So a lot of modern equipment has USB on it, so like this drum machine is MIDI, but as well as having MIDI ports on it, even though they're mini jacks, but they've got MIDI ports, but you can just use the USB, so you don't have to have that sort of separate MIDI cable. But old kit doesn't. So there you go. So there's well worth having a look at. 15 quid. More cables plugged in the back of this desk now. Yeah, but it's good. It's good fun. So that's enabled me to have everything on at once now, which is the goal. Even the one behind me as well. So everything is MIDI in now, apart from the one on the shelf. So you don't have to keep swapping ports over when you're trying to record, which is the goal. So I don't know what the next MIDI technology or music computing technology I'm going to look at next. I do fancy a hardware controller, one with a jog shuttle and faders on and that kind of thing. And there's a few of those out there, so maybe I'll have a look at one of those next. Right, what else do we? Oh, I did hear another rumor as well that a couple of places heard this, not from anyone at Microsoft, but they might be naming. There's a possibility that 22H2 will be named Windows 11 22H2 update, not 2022 update, dropping the 22H2, which makes sense because they initially introduced the H1 and H2 because there was 2 updates a year, but now there's only 1 update a year. It doesn't seem worth differentiating it with the H2 bit.
It's silly to have that differentiation. I think it just confuses people. I think there's another update coming later in the year.
yeah. So I think so it's Windows 11. You've either got the original version or you've got the 2022 update. It makes sense, doesn't it? I did hear a couple of people saying that maybe they should go, now they're really into the version numbers again, is that they should call it version Windows 11.1. But I don't know whether that would cause more confusion, but it does make sense. I mean, that's effectively what it is.
They'd probably get 11.5. They know Microsoft's normal.
Yeah.
Pressure for numbers.
Remember what they did with Windows 95 when you had the OSR 1s, OSR 2s, and OSR 2.5s, and that was really complicated. So yeah. So anyway, we'll see what they do. Now, did you have any other news you wanted to bring to us this week?
Nothing particularly. I mean, I managed to do a trip almost up to your neck of the woods the other day in my electric car and back without charging. It was about 30 miles outside Manchester from Peterborough in a rush because I had to go to get something and then got back, and didn't actually have to charge my car at all. So I got there and back. So that's pretty impressive. Good. 280 mile round trip. 270 mile round trip. I had 280 miles range when I started, and ended up with 10 miles when I got back. So I mean, I love the fact that on this car it's really very reliable what you're going to get on the range. If it tells you the range at the start of the journey, you're going to get that, and maybe a little bit more, which is really good. Coming up to 5,000 miles in it now. So it's averaging about 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour, which is pretty good. Obviously, the price of kilowatt hours is going up like all energy, but At least, unlike you, who I think would struggle to have your own petroleum plant in your back garden. I could actually put an electricity plant in my back garden. My car,
yeah.
I wanted to.
I noticed when I was in Scotland at the weekend, and on the way back, I stopped at the T-Base service on the M6 in Cumbria, and I saw the GridServe. The big GridServe sign, which is, I think, it's the first time I've seen that. But they had quite a lot of. They had a GridServe area and a Tesla area as well, so they had sort of double sets of charging points.
One of the first ones where they put a lot of charging. I think the people are really sort of putting they're putting their oil into this in a big way. It's MFG, the motor fuel group, who own a lot of garages. I keep going past MFG-owned garages and finding 6 or 7 charges, and they're not been making any fuss about this. They've not making any announcements about it. They just seem to be putting hubs everywhere. Which is really good, because if you've got 6 or 7 charges, and these are always forecourts, which is the nice thing. They've always got the facilities that of a traditional type petrol station, where you've got a cafe and you've got shop and everything like that, and toilets, which is obviously a really nice thing to have. So you don't necessarily have to go into public charging services. So I think that's the future. We're going to see more and more of that, and that'll definitely alleviate the range anxiety. May not alleviate the cost anxiety, but that's the case for whatever fuel you're on at the moment.
Yeah, that's true as well. I noticed all the charging points were all pretty busy, but the whole place was actually really busy. I think it's probably the busiest I've seen it.
That's the thing I've definitely noticed over the holiday period with the school holidays, that certainly the first weekend, I've no idea what's got very attractive about Peterborough services, because Peterborough services used to be empty. And this is not just the charges, this is just generally. There's queued up for miles to get into Peterborough services, which I don't quite understand. I know it's one of the few services on the A1, but maybe that's the point. But the charges, there are people queuing for the charges now, which never used to happen. And I've said this before, we were in a golden period for most EV adopters, early adopters in the last few years, but where we had just enough charges to keep going for all the people who actually had cars. And at the moment, we're starting to fall a bit behind on the number of charges, though. If you have the cars out there, the charging manufacturers will put them out because they can afford to do so. I mean, one of the big moans at the moment is that several of the delivery companies have now got electric vans, and we're finding they're hogging charges,
right? Yeah,
because they're running on a franchise operation, and a lot of the people haven't got charging at home, so they're using charges. But the good thing about that is that gives a customer to these charging manufacturers, to charge point operators, so they're making money on the charges now, which they weren't necessarily before, because usage on a lot of these charges is very, very low, because people don't charge out and about much. You tend to charge at home. If you've got home charging, that's what you'll use, because it's the cheapest way to charge. Or you'll charge on destination charging. You go to the shops or whatever, and you'll charge when you get to the shops and on a lower power charger. So the CPOs, the charge point operators, weren't making huge amounts of money on the charges, because the utilisation was down. So having these vans and things on the chargers is actually, in some ways, it's a good thing, because it will encourage them to build more chargers. So hopefully we'll see some expansion on those. And I think also the technology has now changed a bit. So where charge point operators could only put one charger in, or maybe two chargers in a location, they can now put a battery in and have 4 or 5 chargers on the same location available for when the peak periods come, and they charge up when they're not being used overnight or whatever. So I think that's definitely improving. But yeah, it's been interesting to see, and it's definitely become sort of mainstream as well. And some cheaper EVs coming out. The new MG4, which was announced last week at 25k, seems a very, very good car for the money.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So and that's got all the sort of bod cons you'd expect from any car, and does reasonable performance, and sort of reasonable size. Definitely a sort of hot hatch types to start of car. So that I can see that taking quite a bit of market share. So yeah, it's definitely interesting what's going on. I mean, the one that's really interesting is electric cars are actually currently appreciating in value. It's really, I mean, a number of my friends have just upgraded their EVs by putting orders in and waiting maybe a year and a half for the EV to come in. And in the time from when they put the order in to the time they've actually managed to get the car they've currently got has actually gone up in value rather than down. So they're actually paying less than they would have done if the car had come straight in straight away, which is crazy. So cars don't do that; they don't appreciate value. But at the moment, just because there's such a short supply, they do.
Yeah. Because
they last forever. That's the thing.
Well, that's it. Your service. You've not got the same servicing costs and everything else, have you? That's the.
Yeah.
That's quite a considerable amount.
And there's some stuff which keeps coming up. I mean, there's the historical thing about batteries degrading. Batteries have been proven not to degrade as much as was initially thought would happen. Most people can get a couple 100,000 miles out of the car before the battery's degraded to a point where it's not usable. So and possibly even more than that. I mean, I saw someone put saying that on their current rate of use and the current degradation, it'd take them sort of like something like 200 years to get to a point where they couldn't use their car. So that's been less of an issue. So sort of long-term lease deals are definitely out there now, and the second-hand market's really good, and people get more confident in the second-hand market, because as with most modern cars, the problems tend to be in the first 2-3 months of ownership if you're going to have any problems, component issues and the like. Whereas, as you said, there's hardly anything to be serviced on an EV. I mean, you just still have sometimes some cars have. My car's got a gearbox because it has a clutch for separating the front and back wheels, so that's something which we need servicing fairly regularly. But the motors don't really need much. Don't really have sort of the oil changes and the filter changes you had on anything else. So there's very little to do. And surprisingly, the tyres don't wear very quickly either. You think they're heavier cars than they would do, but they don't seem to. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if that's because of the braking, the energy recovery.
Yeah, I think it's regen braking. Yeah, because it doesn't go that sudden slam the brakes on to stop the car and using all the rubber to stop the car effectively. You're using the end motor braking to do it. So yeah, it's definitely intriguing.
Yeah. Well, just judging from the number of cars I saw in the charging up, you can definitely see it's an ever increasing popularity, and I suppose like for the people putting these charging points in, as bad as it is for us, the energy price is going up. It does mean they can make more of a profit, so there's more incentive to put them in. So it does have the benefit of making it a profitable business, and more cars, more people, more markets, or more charging points, and so hopefully it keeps that, the charging points increasing as people buying the vehicles. But yeah, so I'm going to play out some music again tonight. I've not done anything with the Fairlight, but I don't know if you had a chance to catch up on last week's show, but I know you like the Fairlight. So I've been playing with the Fairlight emulator. Absolutely brilliant. I love it. I'm trying to find some original Fairlight files now. That's my next goal, is to see. But I did find, I think I mentioned this to Rich as well, but I did find a couple of videos of some guys that recreated some of the Pet Shop Boys old Grey Whistle tests using Fairlights. I think they had some copies of the original discs as well. So they, so I was watching them on the Fairlight, and I think it's an amazing piece of technology. So I've been playing around with that. So I've not got any tracks written with it yet, but it's yeah, I really enjoyed that. So I'm sure that would be right up your street as well. So you have to the links in the show, but you can just download that. It's a nice little quick installer, and you can actually play with a Fairlight. And as much as I like the VST emulations of software of synthesizers, I do prefer the real thing. But something about the Fairlight one, because that wasn't really a real thing to start with. It was software, wasn't it? So it's software emulated software as opposed to a mini Moog emulator, which is it is not the same thing. This, I like a synthesizer with control surfaces on, but the Fairlight never had that. It was always just a keyboard and a light pen and the music keyboard. So that's what you get. So yeah, it's definitely worth having a look at that. So you check that out. But I'll stick another one of my tracks here. I'll tell you what I did do when I was on holiday. I think I played it out on a show a few weeks ago. The beach, I captured some with my phone. I was down. I went crouched down on the beach and recorded some video of the sort of the waves crashing on the gravel, and then I used that in a track. And I played that one a few weeks ago. And that worked out quite well. But what I did while I was at a castle, I wanted to get the sound. The cricket sounds that you get. When you're in Europe or wherever your hot location. So I wanted to get some of those sounds to use in the track. So while I was doing that, it was a place called Castle Mole in Sicily. The church bells were started ringing, and I was recording it in video to get the audio. And it had this lovely little tune, and I had all of sort of 30 seconds of that anyway. So what I then did is stripped the audio, took that back into my music software, and I noticed that I thought that it's in key. The church bells were in keys, little tunes. So I put the headphones on and I actually managed to replicate them exactly. It's in B flat, and I managed to get the little tune out of it. So over on my Node sampler, I've got some church bell sounds. So I managed to recreate that sort of sound, and then out of that came a whole tune. So that's my next track that I've been working on. So it starts with the actual recording of the church bells, and then it transitions into the synthesized ones or the sampled ones that I got, and then into a piano bass track that I recorded with that, which comes from the tune of the church bells. So I quite good fun doing that. But that was something that would have took a massive amount of equipment years ago. But now you just capture a bit on your phone, and then just play through the headphones, and there it was. I mean, the church bell sample, which on the Node is actually pretty impressive. But you can't. Well, I know the different. I know the two different bells, but actually, especially when you put the cricket sounds and the bells together, you can't tell which was off the phone and which is from the Node sample. Anyway, so it inspired me to write a tune. So that's what I'll stick that one on shortly, because that's as soon as I'm talking about that one. So I've just about finished it. So I'll put the work in progress version on it when we finish the show this week. But yeah, it's quite good fun. So my new thing now is whenever I go out about, I record video and then strip the audio. I was in Scotland and it was absolutely chucking it down. So I was by a river, and it was absolutely the real waterfall type sound. So that'll do. So that's the next thing. So I'm quite inspired by the real world sounds, and then taking that into something that can inspire you musically. But pretty much what Peter Gabriel did in Fairlight in 1982, I'm doing it a few years later with the foam.
Very cool indeed.
Yeah. So I'm going to play out with that. So Where can we find you? And well, in fact, have you got any new videos on your EV channel?
Not yet. I've got so much material I need to edit. Actually, there's something I have to apologise to my viewers because I haven't had a chance to get around to editing it the last few months. But I've got about 3 months worth of really good material actually. So I should be pulling all that together, putting one mammoth video log out in the next few weeks. And you'll be able to find that on my EV owner channel, along with a lot of other interesting stuff.
Yeah, excellent. And then what's your Twitter?
My Twitter is at Garry with 2 R's WMA.
Excellent stuff. So I'm at Ice Dixon on Twitter. So I'll play you out with the tune from Castle Mole, and we'll see you next week.